Go.
I'm just going to, now that this is all sanded nice and smooth, I'm going to put a coat of Danish oil on it. This is what I use to finish the solid wooden rails. You will probably use something else, but I'll show you how I do it anyway.
I have to watch you doing it all.
No, you don't. Hello, right, I've sanded this rail and I've put a coat of Danish oil on, and then I've used one of these scouring pads which you use in the kitchen just to make it nice and smooth. I'll be putting more coats of oil on afterwards, but I like to put the first coat of oil on before I use the filler, because then the filler doesn't stain the wood around the gaps that we've got. And we've got a few gaps in here. So for example, here,
Not the best one in terms of light.
around here, that's better, you can see that better. So little bits like that just around the joint need filling up, and I use a wax filler. Now you can buy this wax filler in all sorts of different colours, different brown colours, and I melt them and mix them into a colour that matches the wood that I'm using.
So you warm them up a bit.
So using a plastic tool, just press the filler into the gap. And then scrape it back off, and then use a piece of this just to get the excess off, like that. And there you can see that is now disappeared.
So you'll do that bit as well, will you?
I'll do, yeah, so where there's that little gap there, I'll fill that up. And then there's the one on the inside, and there's also the holes on the bottom where we screwed
The former in.
the former.
Oh, so you fill all of those too?
So we fill all of these. We don't want any gaps or holes to be showing at the end. And this is, using this wax is much quicker than using most other types of filler, because one advantage is you can mix the colour to get very close to the wood colour, and the other advantage is you don't have to wait for it to dry. That's it now, it's done, finished. And then I'll put a couple more coats of Danish oil on this and then polish it up, and then that will be finished. So now we have, this is the underside of the rail, and this is the printed board that we're going to put into it. So we have to cut a rebate to let this board into that rail. So we're going to cut a rebate like that in the underside of this, so that the plywood sits flush with the rail. And we're going to do that on the router again. So these routers are very important. They do a lot of important work and they do it very quickly. So I'll show you how to do this. Obviously, this is a big rebating cutter. It's going to cut quite a deep rebate. That's nearly 2 centimeters deep there. So put my mask on. Turn the machine on. Cut it all the way. I just cut it like 5mm in to start with, and then once I've gone all the way round like that, I finish it off, cut it to the full depth. Cut to the full depth now that I've done that all the way around. You see there's a lot of fine dust here, which is why I'm wearing a mask. So there we go. You have the rebate all the way around. I think it's just about the right depth. I might have to reset the cutter and cut it a little bit deeper, but let's have a look.
Move that wax.
Well, it's not quite deep enough. It's still a little bit of a step there, so I'll reset the cutter to cut another millimetre or so out of it. When you're doing a lot of these in one go, you'll get the cutter set at the right depth, and then you just go through them one by one and keep going and do sort of maybe 10 or 20 at a time. So the next thing I'll be doing here is just screwing this onto the underside and then fitting the subframe and the bearing mount and the pockets to this, like you have already done on the prototypes that you've made already. So once you've done this, you build the board exactly the same way and finish it off the same way as you've already done. Right, so I've finished doing the rebate. It's the right depth now. So now I'm going to screw this onto the underside. So first of all, right way up, get the pockets lined up in the best position, and then is one. Undo that a little bit, move that a little bit that way.
So this is a real taking your time bit, isn't it?
Well, you have to get this right before you put any screws in, obviously. Get that clamped in the right position and then turn it over. Now, because the screws are going to be quite close to the edge, for these I drill a small pilot hole, because we don't want any of the plywood cracking out, and we definitely don't want any of the wood cracking out on the top. So about a centimetre from the edge of the plywood and about 2.5 centimetres from that corner, just a small pilot hole, and I do 2 to start with. Now, I use these screws. These screws cut their own countersink, but you'll have to do what you did on the previous prototypes you did, which was to countersink and your screws first. Now I've got 2 in, so now what I do is I turn it back over. Just check that it's still all lined up, that it hasn't moved. So now I can take the clamps off because it's still in the right place. And turn it back over. And then I go around the whole board, cutting all the pilot holes. You can see how useful this tool is. You can be drilling and then you can change the bit and you can use it as a screwdriver, and it just makes this very, very quick. This screwdriver bit is magnetic, so I can pick screws up without touching them.
Saves a lot of time.
Okay, that's all the screws in, so that's now fixed to the rail. And then the next thing we do, we glue that on. And we put that on, and then we'll do a proper video of this later And then we get our pocket squares and we put those and we glue those on. Obviously they all need sanding and tidying up first.